Chapter 201 Underground Shelter complete. 3 years later, the underground shelter is finally completed. With the collective effort of millions of people, most of the infrastructure needed for the underground shelter is in place. As for the heat, it has become so unbearable that protective clothing is necessary when going outside. The rising temperatures have even caused the sea to slowly recede as it evaporates. Inside the promised land shelter, the entire shadow group has gathered. "We have finally achieved our goal," they sighed in relief. To reach this point, they faced countless hardships. From resource struggles, examinees disputes, the relentless heat, all of this took a toll on their mortal bodies. "Right, we can finally rest," Max sighed, his skin already darkened from years of mining, making him appear the oldest among their group. "Not quite, we've only completed the structure of the shelter. The interior is still empty," Liam pointed out. "Furthermore, we have only a few million people, and we need to encourage reproduction." "Hey, brother, you're a real workaholic. We should take a break today," Sam said, patting Liam on the back. "That's right. I'm so tired that I need at least a few months of rest," Luke chimed in. As a mechanic, their workload was the heaviest. They even considered inviting other examinees to join their group but eventually rejected the idea due to the associated risks. Competition among examinee groups had grown fiercer over the years as the solar stone on the world was limited. With tens of thousands of examinees in groups working independently, the distribution of resources had become uneven. Those with weaker strength had already perished in the chaos, while others continued to fight for survival. "A few months of rest might be impossible. At most, we can afford a week," Liam compromised, observing the exhaustion on their faces. His sisters and Amara, who was busy with alchemy, Sam and Luke, who were occupied with constructing new technology, and the others defending the base, all welcomed the idea of a week of rest. Of course, even during their break, they still remained vigilant. They couldn't afford to falter now that they were on the verge of success. As a result, a week of banquets and celebrations ensued within the base. Millions of people, knowing that they had a week of rest, vented their stress and enjoyed themselves. This week of rest was later named the Promised Week, in recognition of the completion of the Promised Land shelter and the much-needed break. From that point onward, every year at this time, this week would be celebrated as a holiday dedicated to rest and celebration. After their rest, people energetically returned to their tasks. Sam and Luke pondered how to create the shelter barriers using solar stone. By now, they had already collected tens of thousands of tons of solar stones. In the coming hundreds of years, they would have no problem with energy. Their only problem was the heat. Although their shelter had heat-resistant materials, it wasn't sufficient. In the coming years, the heat would become exponentially hotter, melting even the toughest metals. Unfortunately, it was not an easy task, as other examinees were also working to develop new technology to protect themselves from the sun. As for the three alchemists, Lily, Lydia, and Amara, they were creating a water-producing plant. Water is made from only oxygen and hydrogen, so creating a water-producing plant should be straightforward. The only challenge was the energy conversion. If plants needed to produce water, they also required a large amount of water. That would be redundant, therefore, they aimed to create a plant that could use the energy of the solar stone to produce water. This was a groundbreaking project that, if successful, would eliminate their worries about water. As for condensing water, it was too difficult. With the hot weather, the need for cold or pressure to condense water was enormous, requiring constant development of new technology. Hence, their solution was to create water directly. Many also had different solutions to this problem, such as developing synthesizing devices, supercooling equipment, and even considering digging deep to preserve water. While they were creating a heat barrier and water-producing plants, Liam was meticulously managing the base, as every aspect of its structure required his deep consideration. He had so little time that he sometimes forgot to eat for days. At times, he wondered how his father managed such a vast empire while still finding time for his family and training. If Maximus knew of his son's struggles, he would likely respond, "Son, all you need is enough money, and everything will run smoothly for you." With money, Maximus never truly worried about his empire. If a problem arose, he could simply solve it with more money. However, the situation in the shelter was different, as they lacked sufficient resources. Even if Liam knew the method of his father, he couldn't do so under these circumstances. As he worked on various resource allocations within the base, his office's door opened. Liam and Urtisha entered, carrying a tray of food. Since Urtisha had killed their partner, the Silverus family had aligned themselves with the Shadow Group. They had even become subordinates at Urticia's insistence. This was a common fate for many influential individuals in this world. They often became subordinates of examinee groups. Of course, there were also powerful figures who had examinees at their beck and call. After all, even in this backward world, there were still geniuses who could not be defeated by time. With Urticia's overwhelming strength, the Silverus family could have been one of those people. However, Urticia's fascination with Liam made them otherwise. "Liam, I heard you haven't eaten for a few days again," Urticia complained as she placed the tray of food on his table. "I forgot," Liam answered emotionlessly. Amara had already accepted Urticia's presence. Seeing that Liam couldn't be tempted by the witch's actions, Amara wasn't concerned about anything. On the other hand, Liam had grown somewhat accustomed to Urticia's presence. Meeting Urticia every few days, their interactions were more frequent than those he had with Amara. "Hee, then let me feed you," Urticia suggested playfully. "No, I can handle it," Liam said as he snatched the food and quickly ate it. "Tisk, boring," Urticia muttered, but upon seeing that Liam ate the food she had prepared, she nodded in satisfaction. "Go, I still have work to do," Liam said, his tone slightly softer. "Then I will come back later," Urticia replied before leaving. 30 years later. The world had turned into a blazing inferno. The once fertile ground had become a desolate wasteland. Rocks and dirt dominated the landscape throughout the whole world. In the underground world, life had become either a living nightmare or the last paradise. Due to a lack of planning and resource depletion, riots frequently erupted in the underground shelters. Even the examinees were overwhelmed by various conspiracies. This had become a graveyard for the weak and a throne for the powerful. At this point, less than half of the examinees remained. The Aboriginal people who had once cooperated with the outsiders to survive were now determined to expel them. They no longer wanted to be exploited, believing that what was done was done. However, what most people didn't know was that the dark hand behind the scenes was the same nobles who had frequently exploited their labor. After seizing control of the shelter, things had become somewhat peaceful. With many people having perished, the resource shortage had been somewhat alleviated. In Paradise Land underground shelter, it was still the same, filled with liveliness and hope. The riots in other bases didn't affect them. Liam's meticulous management left no room for any ambitious individuals to gain an upper hand. In terms of resources, under the care of 3 natural alchemists, Lily, Lydia, and Amara, there was an abundance of them. They had long created the water-producing plants as per plan. Furthermore, they also cultivated multiple other crops, ensuring a variety of food supply. The base also implemented a population expansion plan, providing benefits for those who gave birth to the next generation. Now, the base truly resembled a promised land, with a ratio of 1 adult to every 3 children. For every adult, there were at least 4 to 5 children under their care. Due to this, the promised land had transformed into a nurturing haven filled with innocence and hope. In Liam and Amara's bedroom, the 2 lovebirds hugged each other as they reminisced about the past. Their life here had been so long that they sometimes forgot it was just a virtual world. "I can't really have a baby," Amara sighed, rubbing her stomach. Originally, they had intended to demonstrate reproduction, but despite all the years, there had been no results. This was also their only reminder that they were in a virtual world, not a real one. "It's better, I don't want my children to be locked in this world," Liam reassured Amara. Chapter 202 Extreme Time Dilation. Years seemed to be in his favor as he had finally won Amara's heart. They were teenagers on the outside, but here, they were already over 50 years old, a fact that made him smile wryly. Time was indeed the greatest tempering tool, especially for them. His immaturity had long been replaced by a mature aura. "Right, this is a virtual world," Amara said, gazing at Liam tenderly. "What, am I handsome?" Liam couldn't resist teasing her. "No, you're getting old," Amara pinched his nose. Despite taking a longevity potion, without any extraordinary energy, its effects were barely noticeable. Time had left them with wrinkles and a few strands of white hair. "You're getting older too." "What? You don't love me anymore because I'm old? Could it be that you're being seduced by that witch Urticia again?" Amara questioned. Urticia seemed like a glitch in the system, aging slower than they did. Sometimes, when Amara saw Urticia sticking to Liam like glue, she couldn't help but grit her teeth. "No, I will only love you in this life." Liam immediately hugged Amara tighter, as if fusing her into his body. "Do you mean you'll love someone else in the next life?" Amara squinted her eyes. "You can supervise me." I'll truly love you all my life, Liam swore.
Then you'd better.
Sure. How about some exercise? After all, we need to move our bodies to slow down our aging, Liam said meaningfully.
Just what I was thinking.
Let's see if your physique is different from how you look, Amara readily agreed, grabbing Liam's collar.
I love you.
Although they couldn't have children, tasting the forbidden fruit seemed to strengthen their love for each other. Every breath and passion were set free as they indulged in each other's arms. In their hearts, they thought, no matter how the world was, it was worth living as long as they were together. In the Promised Land shelter, private training room. Two middle-aged people were engaged in a fierce battle. The sounds of clashing weapons echoing throughout the room. After a few hours, they paused to catch their breath.
Huff.
This body is really quite fragile. It can't withstand even a few hours of combat, Max complained as he tried to regain his strength.
That's true.
I wish this trial would end quickly so I could use some magic, Ella complained, taking a seat.
Trial?
Max unconsciously nodded. Time had affected him to some extent, distorting his perception of the world. Fortunately, Ella was always there to remind him. As for how Ella could stay conscious and unaffected by the extreme time dilation, she explained that she had already experienced an extreme time dilation, experiencing the whole lifetime of a mortal. At the age of 3, after she had solidified her worldview, she was thrown into a virtual world. Unlike the harsh realities of their current world. In that virtual world, Ella had lived like a princess, doing whatever she pleased. Despite her time as a mortal, Ella's mind remained pure, which was why her grandpa held her in such high regard. After all, one's mindset is the most important talent anyone can possess. By the way, what are your thoughts on brother Liam and sister Amara's relationship? Max asked somewhat awkwardly.
What do you mean? You can't wait?
Ella looked at him, squinting her eyes. The progress of their relationship had been somewhat stagnant, limited to kissing and hugging. Max occasionally felt a twinge of jealousy that his brother had quickly taken out the beauty. No, I haven't forgotten our promise. I'll propose to your parents first before taking any further steps, Max stated firmly. A few decades ago, Max had proposed this condition to Ella after being mocked a little. Although in this virtual world, he could easily defeat Ella. In reality, he was still no match for her. Ella had taunted him for taking advantage of a powerless little girl. This had riled Max up, prompting him to promise that after he defeated Ella in the real world, Max would propose to her parents to marry their beloved daughter into him. Then I will wait for you, Ella said as she stood up. Come, let's fight again so you'll have a chance of defeating me after this trial. Otherwise, I'll be a leftover girl if you can't beat me, she teased. Just wait. Sooner or later, you'll bow down to me, Max thought. In Nathan and Zoe's house, a man opened the door and spotted his beloved, who was cooking dinner. I'm home, Nathan, who had just returned from duty, said. As the head of the security force of the base, Nathan had a heavy workload. Coming home to find Zoe meticulously cooking for him was a comforting sight for his tired body. I said I'm home, Nathan repeated, hugging Zoe from behind. I know, just wait for me to finish cooking, Zoe replied, playing the role of a dutiful wife. Oh, Nathan nodded but continued to embrace Zoe from behind. Smelling the familiar scent, he couldn't help but relax. Being with Zoe was perhaps the only thing that kept him sane. In the real world, with their father safeguarding them from all external dangers, Nathan could be an introverted child, free to do as he pleased. However, in this trial, he had to shoulder the responsibility of protecting his family and eliminating potential threats. All the violence and killing had taken a toll on his mind, making him gloomier and more prone to murderous thoughts. But Zoe was like a guiding light, leading him on the right path. Don't hug me too tightly, or I might miss the seasoning, Zoe complained playfully. Don't worry, I'll eat anything you make, regardless, Nathan murmured as he pressed his body against Zoe. Oh, then let me breathe a little, Zoe said with a smile. Nathan agreed, loosening his embrace. Good husband, Zoe muttered, patting Nathan's head. Truthfully, Nathan's tight hugs didn't bother her. Cooking had already become her instinct, a mere hug wouldn't cause her to fail. She was even a bit delighted that Nathan always embraced her as soon as he came home. Meeting Nathan had felt like a blessing from heaven. First, she had been sent to the most prestigious institute to study the most esoteric knowledge. Second, she had been provided with unlimited resources that could secure her future. Third, her parents had reconciled, even receiving a personal apology from their former enemy. All of this had been thanks to her uncle Maximus, but it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't met Nathan. So, from that point on, Nathan had already left an indelible mark on her heart. From the little boy she had shared the most delicious food with to the grown man who eagerly waited for her to cook. The food is ready. In the biggest entertainment room of the Promised Land shelter, Arya was engrossed in playing games while Neo slept in her lap. Tisk, TSK, the game this time is becoming more sophisticated, Arya muttered as she concentrated. Entertainment flourished widely in the underground world. After all, the best way to escape reality was to immerse oneself in a fictional one. Different games, movies, and novels were updated regularly. Even though they couldn't communicate in person above ground, they could still do so in the virtual space. With highly developed wireless connections, the entire world was somewhat interconnected. It also served as spiritual guidance, reminding them that they were not the only people alive in this world.
Bum. Game over. Damn, is this game even designed for humans? How can such a difficult game still be released? Arya complained as she left a negative review for the game. You're just a sore loser, Neo, awakened by Arya's movements, retorted. What do you mean, loser? This game is just impossible to play, Arya insisted. Give it to me, Neo said, pointing at the controller. Let's see if you can conquer this impossible game. Neo didn't reply. Instead, he started the game. Using one hand he completed that game in just half an hour. Game complete. See? Next time, pick some farming or puzzle games, Neo said sarcastically before returning to sleep. No, you must be cheating, Arya always believed that Neo was cheating. In every game they played, she consistently lost, even when Neo put in only half the effort. Oh, Neo simply waved off her accusation and went back to sleep in her lap. Their relationship was unique, Arya was the pillow and Neo was the bed warmer. Despite the passing of time, their relationship remained that of close friends without crossing any romantic boundaries. The progression of time didn't affect them in the slightest. Even though they noticed their bodies gradually aging, they just thought of it as ugly clothes. As a diviner, Neo treated time like air, providing him with a soothing breeze as he slept comfortably. As for Arya, her true identity was the daughter of an apex sovereign. Extreme time dilation meant nothing to her, and she simply regarded it as having more time to play. The reason others didn't know about this was because she was too low-key and perhaps just too lazy. I'll choose a game you can't beat next time, Arya thought, as she bribed a game designer to increase the difficulty even further. Chapter 203 End of Exam. 50 years later. The world had revolved over half a century, undergoing significant changes. Fewer than 1,000 examinees remained, either succumbing to natural causes or falling victim to the world's aborigines. Despite being sent into this world as children, surviving for over a century posed a huge challenge. The calamities that they accumulated in the beginning erupted, killing them before the mission ended. As for the inhabitants of this world, they had already adapted to the subterranean world. Now, the new generation only learned about the surface world through history and picture books. The subterranean world further thrived and became connected. Shelters had been connected through tunnels, marking a new chapter in their subterranean journey. In the previously Promised Land shelter, now known as the Promised City, a bustling scene unfolded. As the city leader and founders announced their final presence in this world. Citizens of the Promised City. We are here to bid our final farewell and perhaps convey our last wishes, the aged figure, Liam, solemnly addressed his fellow citizens. Living for over a century was a rare feat in a world where the average lifespan barely reached 50 years. Even with various longevity potions, the Aboriginal people in this world could only hope to extend their lives to around 80 years. It seemed that their bodies were unique, offering them a chance to complete their mission. However, even then they were still in their last breaths. This announcement marked their last goodbye. As they entered a hibernation period, hoping to survive to complete their mission of living a century in this world. From the first generation's search for water to the construction of the place we now call home, we have left our mark on this world, Liam continued. The people below couldn't help but reminisce. Hearing stories from their parents and grandparents that sometimes seemed like fantasies. The world they had built with their own hands was something they now considered natural. This is a testament to the sweat and blood they had sacrificed for them to live a carefree life. They gazed at the elderly man on the podium, a living legend and the spiritual leader of their city. Now it is our turn to take off the reins, to allow you, the younger generations, to lead the world, he declared. I hope that you will not disappoint us.
I hope that you will continue to live courageously, carrying the torch from one generation to the next. Finally, I hope you will never forget that there is a surface above us, where we truly belong. Liam's speech caused sadness and conviction all over the place. The older generation was a little sad about the passing of their idol. The younger felt their responsibility and courage booming. This speech was marked in history as the last eulogy of the most beloved ruler. In a secure underground facility somewhere in the subterranean world. 15 people gathered, their eyes locked on each other. Among them were Liam, Lily, Max, Nathan, Lila, Lydia, Sam, Luke, Serene, Syra, Neo, Amara, Ella, Zoe, and Urtisha. We're finally about to complete the test. This body is really uncomfortable to use. Max lightened the atmosphere as he tried to move vigorously. Don't be too active, you might have a heart attack, Ella patted his back. TSK, everything is really getting old, Luke commented as he adjusted his prosthetic limbs one last time. As a mechanic, having an aging body was a hindrance, so Luke replaced limbs with bionic prosthetics. Damn, brother, you should quickly remove that junk from your body, it's not good in the hibernation pod, as Sam chided Luke, seeing that he still cared for his mechanical limbs. Unlike Luke, who couldn't leave his work behind. When Sam's body had deteriorated, making it impossible to work properly. Sam had started to enjoy retirement, playing various entertainment games with his brothers and sisters. Alright, Sai, how will I miss this baby? Luke said, slowly removing his bionic limbs. Sister, look, they look old and ugly, Lila mocked as she clung to Lily. Despite their age, the women didn't show any signs of age and ugliness. Although they couldn't reverse their age, they could change their appearance. Thanks to their constant maintenance and care. Aside from being a little weaker, they looked like they were in their 40s or 50s. As for the boys, they didn't like to go through all the trouble just for the sake of aesthetics. Don't worry, they'll be your cute little brothers again after a nap, Lily reassured. More than that, I'm more excited to meet Dad and Mommy, Serene chimed in. Who isn't? I still remember hugging Dad and Mommy. Oh, how nostalgic, Syra said, reminiscing about their carefree days. Now, having lived for over a century, she couldn't help but smile. Fortunately, they would return to that world after a bit of sleep. Hey, I wonder how my little fox is doing? Lydia mused, capturing the group's attention. They're probably living the life of kings, Lydia complained, thinking of her eagle pet. Thanks to their father's wealth, their pets had the most luxurious homes and food imaginable. Before they embarked on the trial, their pets were already at the 5th tier. Anyway, let's sleep quickly so we won't think anymore, Max urged the group as he hopped into the hibernation pod. Soon, the others followed, one after the other. After a while, only Liam and Urtisha remained in the room. Are you finally leaving this world? Urtisha asked, tears welling up in her eyes. She had long known that Liam and the others were different. After all, what normal person could resist her seduction for a century? Yes? Liam also gazed at Urtisha, looking a bit absent-minded. He had almost forgotten that Urtisha was an aboriginal in this world. Can you stay a little longer? Urtisha said pitifully. I'm afraid I can't, Liam sighed. Then can you hug me one last time? Urtisha requested. Liam walked slowly toward her and gave her a firm hug. This surprised Urtisha, as by a one last hug, she meant that she would be hugging him. Throughout all these years, Urtisha was the only one who took advantage of Liam, taking the initiative whenever she could. Now, Liam's willingness to hug her made her even sadder. You must never forget me, Urtisha said, kissing Liam. After the kiss, feeling embarrassed, she hurriedly left the room, taking one last look at Liam. Even after all these years of teasing Liam, this was their first kiss. Feeling her lips, she couldn't help but smile. Just wait, pretty boy. You must never forget me. In the Ethereum realm, in the city of Arcana, within Maximus Manor. 100 days had passed since his children took the exam. Anxious and eager, Maximus and his wives couldn't wait to see their children. Witnessing their mental struggles, time distortions, and various forms of suffering. Even Maximus began to question whether he had made the trial too difficult. While it might appear as a simple survival mission, the primary difficulty of the trial lay in the time. For these young individuals, who had only lived for a few decades, extreme time dilation could be perilous. If anything went awry, it could drive anyone to madness. The combination of the soul and time dilation made every sensation, sight, sound, and taste vividly experienced by the soul. It presented an extreme challenge that could shape one's entire perspective on life. Maximus, who had traveled through time, had experienced only a few decades of life before coming here. Even then, this experience still hugely affects him right now. For his children, who had lived through a century of time within the trial, the effects were even more profound. Soon, the souls of his children began returning to their bodies. Before he could react, another energy, that seemed to come from the origin of the world, fused with their souls. Maximus was sensitive to all forms of energy and noticed that this world's origin seemed to heal his children's souls. It begins to revert them to a younger state, erasing the scars of time and making their souls stronger. Could it be that this is part of the trial? Maximus muttered. He recalled his own experience with extreme time dilation in the core student trial. He realized that his knowledge and experiences of that world had been somewhat diluted. Back then, he had been inexperienced and lacked knowledge, so he hadn't noticed. Realizing that their souls had returned to their previous state, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. After all, having children who think and act older than him can be a bit awkward. Soon, the virtual pods opened. His children got up and looked at the adults in the room in a daze. Without saying anything, his children rushed towards them, hugging them tightly. Silence lingered for a few minutes as they allowed the children to reacquaint themselves with reality. Why don't we have dinner for a while? Erica suggested. That's a good idea. Let's celebrate the children's successful completion of this trial, Maximus nodded. Furthermore, we have a lot to talk about, Maximus added, looking at Liam, Max, and Nathan. Although they couldn't see explicit or private matters, they roughly understood what had been happening. Hearing their father's words, the three boys couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Now that they were back to their childlike innocence, they couldn't help but be embarrassed about their previous boldness. But seeing their parents again after a century, they were just thankful that they were back again. Chapter 204 Marriage Discussion. In the dinner table. While they were eating, the children were silent as if they were having the most delicious banquet. Ahem, Maximus coughed to get their attention. First, congratulations on passing the trial and becoming an official student, Maximus started. Based on the earlier notification, Maximus confirmed that they had finished the trial and the hidden mission. Second, after watching the clips of your trial, I can proudly say that you are indeed my sons and daughters. This brought smiles to their faces. Getting their father's recognition was probably the best they could ask for. And lastly, Liam, Amara, Nathan, and Zoe, although you are already old enough in the virtual world. Here in the real world, I hope that you still restrain yourselves and wait until you've grown into adults. Dad, don't worry. We are already sensible, and we won't do anything that will harm us in the future, Liam promised. The other three also nodded, confirming Liam's words. Although the world's origin healed their souls from any influence that time had on them, the experience and lessons they learned in the trial were still deeply embedded in their minds. That's fine if you understand, Maximus breathed a sigh of relief. Although he would have liked them to marry earlier so he could earn system points sooner, his love for his children prevented him from doing so. However, since you have already confirmed your relationship, how about we arrange the marriage early? Erica suddenly suggested. That's right, we don't want Amara and Zoe to be cheated by you two bastards, Hazel added. Erica and Hazel took their son's lifelong partners seriously. More importantly, they wanted to have grandchildren immediately. Thinking of their cute grandchildren, they couldn't help but be excited. Mom! Mom! The two blushed as they heard what their mother said. Why you two don't want to be responsible? How can that be? We are merely embarrassed, Liam immediately refuted. I'll be responsible for Zoe, Nathan answered without hesitation. Then it's fine. How about it, husband? When do you think they should get married? Since I got married at 19 years old, then they can also marry at that age. How about 3 years later? Maximus suggested. Liam and Nathan didn't decide immediately and looked at their partners. I'm fine with anything, but I hope my brother can attend my wedding, Amara requested after some thought. Her brother Alistair was the only family she had in this world. Amara wanted her brother to be present in such an important event and meet her most beloved person. That's fine, I will ask someone to find your brother, Maximus nodded. What about you, Zoe? I'm fine, Zoe answered without much thought. She already has Nathan in her heart. A wedding is merely an embellishment to their growing relationship. How about you, Stefan and Mrs. Main? Do you agree to your daughter's marriage? Maximus asked Zoe's parents. Zoe's father and mother, who were also at the table, fell into silence. With all the help Maximus had given them, they were more than willing to have their daughter marry Nathan. However, as parents, they were also a little reluctant to marry off their daughter. Quite conflicted, Stefan finally decided. Zoe's marriage is up to her, but if I ever hear Nathan bullying her, no matter what your identity is, I will let you know how scary the word father is, Stefan said without fear. Although he is no match for Maximus, whether it was identity or strength. However, when it comes to his daughter, life is just a small price he is willing to pay. Don't worry, father-in-law. I vow to take care of Zoe with all my life, Nathan vowed before Maximus said anything. Hearing this, Stefan and Mrs. Main were a little stunned. Although a vow is not as powerful as a contract when it comes to damage, it has a long-lasting effect and cannot be cured with anything. Then we will keep an eye on you from now on, Stefan said as he sighed in relief. During the whole conversation, Maximus stayed silent. He understood Stefan very well, so he didn't take his words lightly. As a father with daughters, marrying any of them off to someone would be heartbreaking. After all, they were your sweet little angels, then they were suddenly taken by some robber. What's worse is that you would be the one to hand your daughter over to them. Maximus couldn't imagine his daughter being married, at least for now. Anyone who dared to harm them would have to face the ultimate final boss, the father. After the discussion of the marriage between the two partners, they turned their heads toward Max and Ella, who had been flirting earlier until now. Feeling the gazes, Max and Ella suddenly stopped as they blushed brightly red. You two seem to like each other. Would you like to get married? Denise, the aunt of Ella, teased. No, Max still has a promise that he hasn't fulfilled yet. Ella suddenly exclaimed. Oh, what promise? Denise asked curiously. Although they could watch what was happening in the virtual world, it was all edited to ensure the privacy of all the students. Except for important events and breakthroughs, most of what they're doing is private. It's a secret. Ella stuck her tongue out. What kind of secret is it? Can you tell me, Max? Denise, seeing that she couldn't get any details out of her niece, turned her attention to Max. It's a secret, Max thought for a while and didn't divulge it. Are you sure you won't tell me? Denise squinted her eyes and asked. No, Max shook his head. Denise still wanted to get the details, but seeing that Maximus warned her with his gaze, she stopped. Boy, you better be prepared. Marrying Ella would take a lot more than you can imagine, Denise advised. All right, enough of that. We should continue to eat. Maximus warmed the atmosphere. As for Neos' relationship with Arya, Maximus didn't bother to bring it up. Looking at Neos, who was still lazily eating, it seems the trial was merely a passing event into him. Maximus can only watch how their relationship develops before talking about it with Neo. While Maximus and his family were having dinner in the virtual world, after Liam and the others went into hibernation. You finally left the world, huh? Urtisha sighed, feeling the fluctuations in their souls. Don't worry, I won't let the world you created be destroyed, Urtisha vowed. Originally, Urtisha's plan was to sit quietly and wait to die. However, she found herself bored to death in just a few months without Liam to keep her entertained. With nothing to do, she thought of conquering the world as to pass the time. Under her influence, she killed anyone who opposed her rule. With her overwhelming strength, unless a highly experienced marksman could hit her, she remained invulnerable. Urtisha didn't know why she was different to make her so strong. She seemed to be different from the other aboriginals of this world. This was also her only hope of ever meeting Liam and the others again. She bet and wished that after her death, in the afterlife, she could reunite with him. A few more years passed, and with Urtisha's domineering style, the world bowed under her control. Without the examinees, no one could challenge her authority. Under her dictatorship, the subterranean world became closer and more magnificent. Year after year, various technologies were invented and produced. After decades, they were finally able to create a device that could isolate solar stone from absorbing heat. With this technology, they found and mined all the solar stones they could find in the world. Without the heat absorbed by the solar stone, the world returned to normal and life began to thrive. After a few decades, seeing the ground become livable again, mass migration began. With the technology accumulated in the subterranean world, the surface world also prospered. Under the conscientious care of the people, the world transformed into a paradise. To commemorate her past, Urtisha named the world the Promised World. 100 years passed and Urtisha was already over 200 years old. Standing at the hibernation station, a look of nostalgia filled Urtisha's aging eyes. Even though she was regarded as the immortal empress by the world, she couldn't escape the cruelty of time. "Baby Liam, it's finally my time." Urticia smiled as she slowly touched the hibernation pod. "I hope you don't forget me or I'll bite you to death. Also, that bitch Amara better be treating you well." "No, it's better not, so you will leave that woman and come to me." Urticia began to mutter as she reminisced about the past. During all these hundreds of years, it seemed that Liam had become imprinted in her mind. Every second, every minute, all she thought about was Liam. She didn't know what charm that pretty boy had used on her to make her so obsessed. Feeling that her life was running out, she smiled wryly. She only hoped that her premonition was true and that she would meet Liam again. Slowly closing her eyes, she gathered all her strength to mutter one last word. "Liam, I'm coming." Chapter 205, Goddess of Love. Divine Continent, Elysium Domain. Amidst the towering clouds, there exists a paradise that houses a magnificent castle standing tall and proud. Inside the castle, an otherworldly beauty was frowning, seemingly in deep trouble. "What is this feeling of love? Am I cursed?" Elysienne, the goddess of love, questioned. Did the extreme virtual world, created by Sage Agon, fail or something? Elysienne's frown deepened. This is the first time she entered the extreme virtual world crafted by Sage Agon, a Tier 9 Game Master. A Game Master is a profession that delves deep into the laws and rules of the world, formulating games based on these rules or bending them to their will. This profession is not very popular, that very few took it as their profession. However, despite these challenges, lack of inheritance, few opportunities, and a lack of platforms, Agon, hailed as the Sage of Games, still ascended to one of the apex sovereign. He used games as his leverage, defeating all the odds and coming to the top of the world. The reason for his success lay in the fact that almost half of the top 100 virtual games in the arcane continent were his creations. With the feedback from the world's origin, he became the fastest being to reach the apex realm in all the HAREM realm. What Elysienne had just played was the extreme virtual world, which ranked in the top 30 on the leaderboard. The uniqueness of this game lay in the fact that everything in it was real. Despite being a mortal world, every person, plant, animal, and even object, as long as they possessed consciousness, was real. The reason for this realness was the fact that the game was administered by real beings, the vast majority of whom were mortal humans. These mortal humans and all the others had their consciousness transferred into the virtual world without any memories of the real world. After living a lifetime in the virtual world, mortal humans were usually rewarded with a lifetime of wealth. With a time differential of 1 to 360, these mortals only needed to work for a little over 2 months to secure a lifetime's worth of wealth. Of course, this generous compensation came with a significant trade-off. While it may seem that these mortals only invested 2 months for a lifetime of wealth, the time spent in the virtual world was experienced by their souls. Without healing their souls, they could only live for another 30 to 50 years after exiting the virtual realm. Other beings were also drawn to this world because of the various incentives that it offered. As for who is willing to bear the price of all this trouble, it's the 8th and 9th tier powerhouses. Staying in the extreme virtual world for a lifetime can rapidly strengthen their will. With their strength, the damage of time will only fortify their soul. Regarding their experience, from birth to death, they would also have no memories. They can only passively accept the benefits bought by the extreme virtual world, which is hassle-free. After all, these powerhouses didn't want to be burdened by people living in an imaginary world. The only reason Elysienne felt something is that she is the goddess of love. The embodiment of love itself, even though she didn't have memories of her life in the virtual world. Elysienne felt a deep sense of love and helplessness. Since it was the first time Elysienne played this game, she didn't know what went wrong. As for why would she bother playing this game when she can have everything at her fingertips? That's because of the zealous witch hidden deep inside her. Elysienne is not born naturally like most of the gods. She got her position by killing the previous god and inheriting her godly authority. Unfortunately for Elysienne, a god is not something that can be killed without consequences. Although she replaced the previous goddess of love, she also received the curse of the zealous witch. From time to time, Elysienne would experience hysteria, causing her to become a seductive witch in heat. Previously, she could still control it, but as time went on, the curse seemed to strengthen itself. With no other choice, she tried the extreme virtual world, which others said to deeply cleanse one's soul. Although the game is only available on the arcane continent, as a 9th tier being, getting access from the divine continent is easy. After entering the game, she also felt the curse calming down a little. But just a few days later, a different feeling emerged. A feeling of love and obsession seemed to take over. Under this change, Elysienne immediately wanted to quit. Unfortunately for Elysienne, she was too unlucky. The world she managed to enter was a private testing ground rented by the Lumina Chrysalis Guild. Usually, this would never happen, but because Elysienne used private access, she managed to enter the world through sheer luck. As a private testing ground, the world allowed entry but not exit. Seeing that Elysienne couldn't quit through normal methods, Elysienne also tried to send her power to her mortal self so that she could destroy the world and consequently exit the virtual world. Who knew that even with all of this, her mortal self didn't do anything? Instead, as time went on, the love and obsession grew like a raging fire. Now, although the curse of the zealous witch had calmed down, there was another emotion that she needed to rid herself of. The only problem was that she was the goddess of love. How could she get rid of her authority's godly essence? Doing so would likely lead to her immediate demise. Yes, as the goddess of love, she couldn't eliminate her feelings. The goddess of love was destined to be loved and love all living beings in the world. This was also the reason for the downfall of the previous goddess of love. Her deep love for her people became Elysienne's opportunity. After all, despite being a newly born god, the previous goddess of love is not something an 8th tier like her can kill. However, the carelessness, deep trust, and love eventually led to the previous goddess's downfall. This was also why Elysienne didn't want to be too influenced by her godly authority. Others only needed to love her, there was no need for her to reciprocate. But now, a hint of love emerged, dyeing her mood until she gradually became a puppet of her godly authority. This was the usual fate of newly born gods, assimilated by their authority, turning them into mere puppets. With no thoughts or will of their own, they existed solely as pawns for higher gods. Now the problem in front of her is also this. Sooner or later, if not remedied immediately, she would eventually be engulfed by her authority. Now, what do I do? Elysienne frowned. Without any memories of the virtual world, she couldn't even begin to find the one who had caused all of this. If she could confront the man who had tainted her with the hint of love, solving her problem would be easier. She could either erase the man directly so her love would have no source, or devote all the love she had for that man to ensure it wouldn't consume her. Unfortunately for her, not even the game master, Sage Agon, knew all the details of the various virtual worlds. Even if she were to ask, finding the man amidst the vast number of virtual worlds would be impossible. As for the inconspicuous test conducted by the Lumina Chrysalis Guild, it was just a slight ripple in the endless sea. Even the parents of most of the examinees didn't bother to pay close attention to what was happening in the virtual world. To them, the test was childish with no learning substance. It was better to train than to watch children wrestle among themselves. Furthermore, the Lumina Chrysalis Guild was not the only one conducting tests in the extreme virtual world. Various top guilds and families also rented private extreme virtual worlds customized for their members or heirs. As for Elysienne, she didn't think in that direction at all. Previously, when she was still a believer of the goddess of love, her source of information was limited to the divine continent. Furthermore, she had just become a god, with little experience and knowledge, everything was still new to her. How could she think about something she didn't even know existed? I guess I can only ask help from the Council of Gods, Elysienne thought as a last resort. The Council of Gods consists of higher gods and new gods who are still not assimilated by their power. As for those who have already been assimilated by their power, they live in a closed state, managing only their domain. Without their own thoughts, such gods are extremely xenophobic, only thinking about their believers and regarding others as heretics. This is why other gods regard them as thorns and eliminate them when they can. This is also why, even though she killed the previous goddess of love, Elysienne was not targeted by other gods. Deciding to seek help, Elysienne suppressed the budding feeling of love as she flew through the god domain. The center of the divine continent, much like the origin domain in the arcane continent. I hope I can make it through.